right, so I got to ask our audience this question. How many times have you seen The Phantom Menace? What do you think about that? 20? More? 100? It doesn't matter how many times you've seen it. There's something you haven't noticed yet. And that inspires our new segment that we're going to do today on the Resistance broadcast. So welcome everybody back to the show. This is our Monday show. It's me and James today. What's up, James?
Hello. How you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm excited to be here to talk about things that I never noticed in the Phantom Menace. Or maybe I did. Maybe I've noticed yours. Maybe you've noticed mine.
Right. There could be some, we both have the same picks. We never share our picks on this stuff. But this isn't like a Kessel run. It's going to be more of a chat. And we're trying it out. You know, we're going to see how this segment goes. Hopefully you all enjoy it. It's in the spirit of always finding something new in things you love. And for those of you who may have missed our episode from Thursday or Friday, Lacey had announced that, with her pregnancy and she's due in November, she's just dialing back a little bit where she's going to be on our TRB live shows, whether that be Wednesday or Thursdays, and our Patreon stuff as well. But it's going to be sitting out the Monday shows just to give herself a little bit of a breather. So we'll miss you, Lacey, but we'll hold down the fort and we'll see you on TRB Live. And to break the fourth wall, we talk to you every day anyway. So James, we're going to kick things off before we kick the tires on the new segment with something that we're pretty used to doing.
I fear nothing, for all this, as the Force wills it.
That's right, Will of the Force. Now, guys, if you enjoy what we do, please consider supporting us on Patreon, which you can find our Patreon at patreon.com/resistance broadcast. There you'll find that tiers start at just $5 a month, which is going to give you access to exclusive podcast episodes and more benefits, including submitting topics to this very segment that we're getting ready to do called Will of the Force. Again, just head over to patreon.com/resistance broadcast and you can join the resistance there. We do appreciate your support.
Thank you. Yeah.
And speaking of being able to submit topics to Will of the Force, let's kick it off with a Patreon submitted question. This one specifically is coming from General Fulcrum _77.
Diana.
From _77, Diana, wanted to know, will Thrawn survive the first season of Ahsoka? John, I'm gonna go first on this one. I'm gonna snag it right from you.
Take it.
I'm gonna say that he will, and I imagine you're gonna say the same thing, because to me, it seems like they're setting up Thrawn to be the bigger villain of what they've already been slowly rolling out with The Mandalorian. Yeah, they're giving you the pirates and they're giving you Grief Karga and they're giving you, these other things. Whatever we see in Skeleton Crew, whatever we see in Ahsoka, that's fine. But I think that it all is leading up to Thrawn having been the person who's been pulling the strings the entire time. And he will not be somebody that you can just say, oh, man, we've been looking for you. We finally found you. You're dead. Now we can go about our business.
Right.
I think that he has been the one that has been pulling the strings the whole time, and he is the villain of Dave Filoni's movies. What's your thoughts?
Movies? Are we doing an
I did say
reveals?
that. Well, I think every time we talk about his thing, we talk about it in the context of the movies that were announced, so.
I think this is 100% lock. I think he's the villain. Like you said, the moment we heard at Celebration that Filoni was making a movie that will be the culmination of all these series that tie into this Mandalorian thread, he's the big villain. I agree completely. I don't think they're sugarcoating it. Even Dave Filoni said he's our villain. I think it's important for them to establish him and build that up for general audiences. And for audiences who maybe haven't read the books, like myself, but I'm well aware of Thrawn, or seen Rebels, it's going to be pretty new to meet this guy. And it'd be very strange for general audiences to meet this villain that Ahsoka alluded to in Mandalorian chapter 14. And then all of a sudden, like you say, they just kill him off. Now, it wouldn't be a stretch for Star Wars to do something like that, but I think they do have plans for him beyond Ahsoka, and like I said, including that big theatrical film. So I'm with you, buddy. It is a lock. Thrawn is surviving season 1 of Ahsoka. Surviving.
Yeah. And you know it's weird too. Like, here's another thing: is that the fact that they would be like, no, haven't we been advertising Balin as the main villain? You know what I mean? They make him the main villain. Then what is Thrawn doing as the secondary villain who then dies? Like such a waste of building up Thrawn if he's not even the one you're really advertising as the villain of the show of this first season. And then also killing him off. It doesn't make any sense. He's gonna be around for a little while. All right, well, let's move on to the next one here. We got a Patreon submitted question.
We're doing this all time Patreon submissions.
We are, yeah. We're doing one from Commander Shane Dowley.
Thanks, Shane.
Shane sent in the question: will we ever see the fan base be as united and positive about Star Wars as we all were after TFA? John, what do you think?
No. I just don't. I think that was a perfect storm of no one expected Star Wars to come back, and then when we heard it was coming back and who was coming back and all that stuff, it just made everybody very excited. And then I think TFA was pretty much enjoyed by most fans and critics. And I feel like after TLJ, things took a split, and I don't see us going back to where everyone's sort of jumping around Endor like Ewoks after the second Death Star blew up. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think you are probably right. What I'm looking at or trying to look at is how much the Phantom Menace made after inflation, after adjusted for inflation. It says 1.8 billion, which is still not as much as The Force Awakens made. I would like to know maybe how that was domestically, because domestically would be the thing that we're sort of relating to. Like when we say we, I know that it's globally, but when I'm thinking about the hype generally, it's like with your friends or your coworkers or your family, or, you know, what you're seeing. What?
You're talking about Last Jedi?
No. I'm talking about Phantom Menace.
Oh, Phantom Menace. Oh, okay.
Yeah, adjusted, because I'm thinking, okay, yeah, there was Star Wars, but the question is, will we ever see as height as it was? And I'm like, I think that the height possibly of Star Wars, like I think we talked about this like on another Will of the Force, like with Jackson, I think, like what was the absolute peak like craziness? And that might have been leading up to Phantom Menace. It was like everybody was unified, everybody wanted to see it, everybody was super excited. And I think that even then, if you adjust for inflation, I still think The Force Awakens might have made
1.87 billion.
Well, that's worldwide, but domestically, so it wasn't as big as Force Awakens. Yeah.
No.
So then Force Awakens did top it. So I don't know, that gives me a little bit of hope that maybe there's still the possibility, because you would think it would be Phantom Menace, but yet Force Awakens was able to top it.
Phantom Menace didn't have the luxury of the returning big three, the way TFA was marketed with Hamill, Ford, and Fisher. And I think that put TFA over the top over Phantom Menace, where if it had its own Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor, whatever, we'll see what that turns out. I think
even then, I don't think they could ever do that. I mean, that wouldn't even make any sense.
But I think that answers the question for both of us.
I think you're probably right. It was so big, and everybody was hopeful, especially when there was that vibe of like, well, we were all excited for Phantom Menace, but Phantom Menace let us down. But we were all excited for Force Awakens. Force Awakens did not let us down. You know what I mean?
Add a sort of biased view on this is, I don't worry about the collective fan base as much as people who I interact with and stuff like that. And I gotta, I gotta tell people if they don't know, like TRB and what we have going on, and whether it's Patreon or just our community in general, it is that. People still love talking about Star Wars and celebrating it together and having a good time. So if you're just new to us and you just found us recently and you're yearning for that, Shane right here, who submitted this question, I imagine he'd be able to tell you that this is a good spot to be. Shameless plug. Shane full
Shameless
plug with a shameless plug.
Yeah. It's sad to say that though, isn't it? It's like,
sure.
It's like, sometimes I feel like when people are like, what was the best one of the three or whatever, you're like, well, it's the first one. And it's like, that's not to say that like it was all downhill from that point on. You can still like things. I think people still like, say, Raiders was the best one, but we still enjoyed the other Indiana Jones movies. Whatever.
I'm just advising people don't get hung up on like the collective. Like, I think people are too worried about what other people think about something. And like I'm not saying Shane, who submitted this question, thinks that, but if person X out there is the only person to like something, but they love it, does that change anything for you? Not me. There's plenty of movies where sometimes I feel like I'm the only person who likes it, and I still love it. It's just like I don't get the affirmation from other people that my opinion's good. I'm over that. I don't know. I advise people to steer in that direction too. But
yeah, I think everybody likes it when they have the band that they love that nobody else knows.
That. Yeah.
Right. But also there is that thing where sometimes when you love something and everybody else loves it too, it's not as good. But there's this third thing that's rarely talked about, which happened with Force Awakens, which is you really love it and you are so happy that everybody else loves it too.
Yeah. True.
It's a great time when you can, no matter who you're talking to, be like, well, at least this artist exists. We always have that album, and it's just like universally, you're rarely ever going to run into anybody that's like, that's, I disagree, or that stunk, or whatever, Yeah. It's just nice to always have that thing. And I think that time with Force Awakens was really, really cool because we were all validated on Star Wars, having spent the last 20 years defending it against people who didn't like the prequels.
Yeah, it is. I could see that angle too, where people feel the need to defend the thing they love, and I do that too. But like, if you free yourself of that, you're gonna be a lot less stressed or worried about that aspect of things. Just let go of it. And if you see someone who's like, oh yeah, Star Wars, yeah, that stopped being good in blank, insert year here, just be like, all right, cool, man, whatever. Okay, great.
Yeah. I definitely know that there are people, even in my personal life, that I've encountered that have been like that. Like, oh, I didn't bother to even watch the Disney Stinkwells or whatever,
Yeah.
And I'm like,
do you like broccoli? They're like, no. I'm like, well, have you ever tried it? No. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I do that with my son all the time. He sees something. He's like, he thinks he's not going to like it, so he doesn't try it. I'm like, well, just try it. He's like, no, I don't want it.
Yeah.
And I think that's good.
Bennett's a little bit like that. I think Bennett is adventurous enough that he's willing to trust us sometimes to be like, okay. And he's very honest. When he doesn't like something, he says, I don't like it. And when he does like something, he's like, I was wrong. That's delicious.
Yeah. Johnny
that's
tried
cool
shrimp today.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And shrimp is like an ugly looking thing.
Sure.
You would think kids would be like, oh, no. But he tried it. And he was like, okay.
That's bolder than what I would say Bennett was his most recent thing, which was we went to a restaurant and he tried the bread with butter He doesn't like butter. He's never like wanted anything with butter on it, but he tried it. He tried the bread without the butter and was like, that's gross. And we're like, well, kind of. Yeah. I mean, like, the reason people like this is because they get the nice butter on it and it adds an extra flavor. And he tried it with the butter and he's like dipping it in the butter. He's like, this is better.
So now he's a big butter guy.
I mean, I wouldn't say he's a big butter guy, but he recognized that the thing that he didn't like was actually the thing that is supposed to make it good, you know?
I just think that's funny that you picked, I thought you were going to pick something relatively risky, and you picked the most basic food on the planet. It's like bread and butter.
Well, you know how it is with condiments, though. Like kids are like, only ketchup. Like they won't try mustard. They won't try ranch. They won't try mayonnaise.
Dude, my kids go through gallons of ketchup. It's insane.
Yeah. So to me, butter is a condiment that I'm like, hey, buddy, you know, like I know you like hot dogs with ketchup, but like there are so many other things you could put on it. And to me, the butter was sort of that thing. He's like, I don't want that. You know, I don't want that thing. I don't trust it. I don't like it. So I don't know. I once made cinnamon toast with him, and he was like, "Can you make it without the butter?" I'm like, "Honey, it's like that's the thing that makes it cinnamon toast."
You're like, yeah,
just like put it on.
No problem, buddy. And you're like,
yeah.
Whip it on there anyway.
I was like, it's got to have it.
Yeah.
I think the same thing for garlic butter too. Yeah, he didn't want garlic bread with butter, and I was like, Bennett, it's like that's the bread. The bread is just like baked into the butter. The butter's just baked into the bread.
Yeah.
Guys, I think we're in agreement there that it's probably not ever going to be as big as it was during TFA, but we can
everybody
maybe hold out a little bit of hope. But
everybody liked the bread and butter in 2015.
Oh yeah. That's what it was. Star Wars bread and butter. All right, we got one more Patreon submission. This time, the question is from Mike Darth Hurricane Waldron. Mike,
speaking
Waldron.
of broccoli.
Oh yeah. He loves broccoli. Mike asks us the question: will we see any of the voice actors who were not chosen to continue their roles in live action appear in some fashion in Dave Filoni's movie?
I thought this was a great question. And you're going to go first.
No. No. I think that I don't know. The thing is like I feel like this just feels like it would be really easy to do, like, oh, put Ashley Eckstein in the background and there she is she's this other like commander or something. But like when you look at the laundry list of people who that's going to be with voice actors that that aren't the people, I mean, it's a lot. And I think to have a movie that's so full of these cameos that fans are going to say don't really serve the story or the greater Star Wars good other than to wink and to nod at the moment, makes it feel like Dave Filoni is like just a normal dude who's lucky enough to make a Star Wars movie. And I think he's better than that. He serves the story, and that's what he does. Like he writes, and he's a good dude, but he didn't pull the favor. He didn't say like, well, we could get Rosario Dawson, but come on, I'm going to do Ashley Eckstein, you know, because she's my friend and she's owed this, and, you know, it'd be really cool and fans would love to see it. He serves what is the best for the product in the end. And with so many people being in that specific spot, Mike, of people who don't carry their character over, I don't see the wink and the nod coming. What do you think, John?
I don't think so either. I remember back in the day when I used to report Star Wars news, that whole thing about Ashley Eckstein not getting an audition for live action Ahsoka, and the word that I heard was that she was devastated about that and hurt. But then she puts on the good face for public. She never spoke about it. This was all things that people had heard from her camp. I still think there's hurt. I think Taylor Gray, I'm sure there's hurt there. You know, we spoke to him before this decision was made, and he was talking about doing live action sword fencing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he was pretty candid about the fact that he was interested in doing it, because he said, I'm an actor first, you know, I can play this role, you know, stuff. I just still think that there's a certain level of pride that comes there. Like I can't imagine seeing Tia Sircar popping up as a bartender in, you know, Filoni's movie or something like that. So
right.
I love the question. I think this is a great question, Mike. And I want to know what most people think about this, because I'm curious what our audience thinks. But for me, aside from it being like taking me out of the show where I'm like, oh, there's Taylor Gray. I just don't think, because I can get past that. You know, John Williams showing up in episode 9, George Lucas showing up in Revenge of the Sith. It happens, and it's cool. It's a nice little nod. But I just, for the actors, it seems a little, I don't want to say pathetic, but it seems odd to me, and I just don't think it's going to happen. So
so my original thought was that it's, you know, Tia Sircar, it's Vanessa Marshall, it's Taylor Gray, it's David Oyelowo, you know, it's like all these. Well, actually, he hasn't made the jump, but I usually put him into that category because he's a black actor who's playing a white actor. So if it ever happened, he can't play the character. That's not going to happen. So, so I kind of put him in that category too. But the thing about this that's kind of making me second guess it is The Mandalorian does a lot of this. I mean, you had the 3 directors show up as X-Wings. You have a bunch of celebrities and comedians showing up in the shows, like Jack Black and stuff. And I don't really know that Dave Filoni was looking at that situation. He goes, you don't think people are going to be pulled from this? People are going to be pulled from this. He's down. He was okay with that. But I just think, I think the list is too long for them to give it to like one or 2 of these people and not to the others. So they just say like, we're just not doing that. And we're not going to give these people these background cameos and stuff. And
it'd be cool maybe to see them in another Star Wars project that doesn't connect to this as completely different characters one day.
Yeah, totally. I don't care that Vanessa Marshall shows up in The Acolyte. That's great.
The difference with this situation versus like, you know, 21 Jump Street, when they had the cameos by DeLuise and Johnny Depp, or Starsky and Hutch, when you see the original guys, it's not a thing where, you know, they're too old to play, so here's the new reboot version and we're just doing like a nod to the OGs. These actors some of them could have had a shot to play these roles. It's just a different thing, and I bet their agents would even advise them not to do it, if their publicists. But it's a great question. But I just don't. I think we both agree. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yep. All right. Well, that is going to be it for Will of the Force this week. Thanks again to all the people who sent in questions, specifically patrons. Thank you very much. And again, just a reminder that if you want to start submitting questions, just head over to patreon.com/resistance broadcast.
Yes.
John, you want to go ahead and introduce this section and then we'll cut to it?
Well, I'll let Luke Skywalker introduce it. Here's our brand new segment on TRB.
Look, did you see that? What?
There it is. Did you see that? Now you're probably wondering, what is that? I kind of told you at the top, but we'll go over it again. So think about it. So no matter how many times you've seen a Star Wars movie or Star Wars show, if you look close enough, divert your eyes from your usual vantage point where you usually look when a frame comes up, focus with your ears a little more in certain scenes, there will always be something new for you to see or hear. Now, that's the inspiration for this new segment. Did you see that? Which is, of course, a nod to that line you just heard from Luke in the trash compactor. But to kick this new segment off, we're revisiting the start of the Skywalker saga with the Phantom Menace, and specifically the pod race scene from the Phantom Menace. So, you're looking at about, if you're watching, say, Disney Plus, for example, like 55 minutes to an hour and 10, 15-minute scene, just the race itself, pretty much. And each of us has rewatched this, and we've taken some notes. We haven't compared our notes, so we may have some shared things. We may have some things where it's going to be like, you didn't know that? What? You know, that type of stuff. And you're probably going to say the same thing. Or maybe there'll be some things we point out where you're like, wow, I didn't notice that. I got to go rewatch it. So what's cool about this segment is we'll try to tell you, like we did on Thursday, we told you in advance what we were doing. So some of you may have went back, took your notes, watched the scene. If not, that's cool. Listen to us and then go back, find the things we pointed out and find your own and let us know what you found. It's all about like watching something you love and you feel like you know like the back of your hand right there, which I don't know either. What is that? I don't know. But seeing something that you never saw before or heard before, it's finding something new in things you love. So, James, we're going to do this now. It's our first time with this segment, but the Phantom Menace Podrace scene, which is a great scene. Some people say the best scene in the prequels. Some people say the best scene in Phantom Menace.
I'm going to pull a How I Met Your Mother and go, stop. Great scene.
Great scene. Yeah.
Which actually, funny enough, is the trash
Wars.
compactor scene.
Yeah.
Which is the name of the segment.
The name of the segment. So it's quintessential George Lucas. He's all about fast, hot rods and that sort of thing. And you know he probably had so much fun putting this scene together and developing it and seeing its final outcome. Because the scene, say what you want about some aspects of some of the prequels, this scene holds up like from a effects standpoint, almost 25 years later. 25 years next year.
And just general storytelling. Like, I don't think anybody's like, this race is so boring. You know what I mean?
Which is going to bring up my first observation, which I think I sort of knew but never really fully encompassed, was the fact that this scene has no music in it until the very end of the race.
That's interesting. Well, yeah, I'm going to make a bet as to why they did do that.
Okay. Now, let me just say, the music does kick in at the very last home stretch when they're banging into each other. It's Sebulba and Anakin.
Yep.
And you hear that dun, 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 dun,
Yep.
dun, dun. That's it. The whole race, no John Williams. So I think I know what you're going to say, but why do you think that's the case?
The reason there's no music here is because they knew that the thing that was going to lead this and make it the best it can be is the sound.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they knew that they were going to put a lot into the visual effects, but the visual effects weren't going to land if the sounds didn't land, and they needed to totally put all of the audio ability into the high and the low end, you know, all that stuff. Because if you think that putting music over that is going to actually elevate the scene emotionally, then you don't have the faith that your audio and your sound effects are as good as they actually are.
I agree. And it also, there's a rawness to it that puts you in the race. There's a lot of POV shots where you're really behind the wheel of the cockpit of the pod race. They're very close shots. You're in the action. And I think not having the music and just hearing the sounds of the race really puts you into that race.
Mm-hmm.
A good choice. I mean, it's funny to say, like, Johnny, we can do without you here. We can do without the greatest composer of all time for the next 15 minutes. But I think it was a good choice. So I think that's something in the back of my mind I probably knew, but until I watched this with this new like analytical scope, I never really confirmed. And until the very end, there is no John Williams music from the green flag, so to speak, dropping to that final home stretch. Now, what are some things that you noticed this time around about the pod race and the Phantom Menace?
There's one that sort of like I'll save for later because it's kind of like a bigger thing. But one smaller thing that I noticed is that every time they cut to the scene of the announcer with the two heads, I can never remember his name. You know what it is, right?
Yeah, it is Fode and Bede.
Yeah. Every time they cut to him, I am always keeping my eyes on him. And you pause there and you look around, and I've never noticed that above his head on the outside of the little thing that he's sitting in, there are 3 cameras. And I thought at first they were like guns or blasters or some type of turrets or something. And I was like, no, that wouldn't make any sense. And it dawned on me, I'm like, they're the cameras. And I was like, honestly, hold on a second. Have we ever seen a camera in Star Wars? Has there ever been any situation that we saw a device that was filming or broadcasting besides... Oh, okay. You can think of one. I mean, besides like like obviously recording like a person like talking, but those usually are like droids or just little like a piece of glass or something. This was like an entire camera. What's the other one?
So, well, 3 actually. In A New Hope, Chewie shoots out the cameras in the detention level when they sneak in.
Okay.
In Attack of the Clones, Anakin purposely situates the security cameras in Padme's bedroom to lure the trap. And he says that. He says, I'm watching her on the cameras.
Right.
And then
okay. Wait, but do they show the cameras? They talk about them, but they do show them?
He says the word cameras.
No. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying, do they show the cameras?
In the A New Hope one, for sure. In that one, I am not positive.
Because I mean, you can walk like they walk into a bar and there's obviously like broadcasts of stuff. Like I know there are cameras in the world, but what I'm saying is, have we ever seen the physical thing? Because we don't ever see somebody like taking a picture or something.
A New Hope, yes. And then in Rise of Skywalker, they're shooting out the cameras on the when they were going to rescue Chewie.
Right. Again, but I don't doubt the one where you said where they shoot out the camera, because that does sound familiar to me. But even in Rise of Skywalker, I can picture them like going through and blasting the cameras, but I don't know that they cut to the camera and see it explode.
Yeah.
Because what my curiosity here is like, I'm familiar with like cinema grade cameras or DSLRs or anything like that. Security cameras, just in general, we all kind of have an idea of what they look like. But what do they look like in Star Wars? Well, this broadcast camera, I didn't even realize what it was because I thought that it was like a turret, because that's just generally what's around in Star Wars, like engines and turrets and batteries, all that type of stuff. But I looked at that thing and realized after a few seconds that it is the main cameras that are filming this thing across, well, maybe just Tatooine, but like,
I have to correct
galaxy.
Myself. Maybe we have to do this for Attack of the Clones too now. If people like the segment, I believe what Anakin says is he turned off the cameras and he's using the Force, and he goes, "I could see everything that's going on in that room."
Right.
And Obi-Wan's like pretty much like, "Are you crazy?" But yeah, so definitely A New Hope, you see Chewie shooting out cameras, but that's a good observation, because that's a good point. Those are 3 cameras and they could look like they're guns or cannons or something like that. I also have a couple things about the announcers if we want to like knock that aspect out. I've tweeted this before, but I think it's good to bring up. They confirm multiple universes in the Phantom Menace for the first time in Star Wars, because the announcer says, "I don't care what universe you're from, that's gotta hurt." And to just using the word universe, you can say that there are multiple universes. Now that's up for interpretation, but I just want to throw it out there that he says it, because if he knows what the word universe is, they say galaxy and it's a galaxy. So if he says universe, that means there's a universe. And he says, "I don't care what universe you're from." Now, it doesn't mean it, but it's something to think about. That's all I'm going to say.
The only other time that I can, because there's always those random scenes where they don't say droids, they say robots, or something. Yep. But the only other time that I can think that the term universe was used off the top of my head is Jango Fett. He says something along the lines of like, "I'm just a small man trying to make my way in the universe." And simple I'm like, man, simple man, whatever the line was. But I'm like, I've always felt like he should have said galaxy there. Yeah. But he said universe. And I'm like, that's weird that they're implying that there's I even think of Star Wars as just like something that's in this one galaxy, and that's as far as it ever could go, because they don't ever talk about other galaxies that are, you know,
right.
like we're in the Milky Way. There's like Andromeda that's the closest, you know. Like we can't go very far, but even if we could and we were bouncing around Milky Way, it still seems like the entire Star Wars world is confined to the galaxy. So those random small uses of the term universe to me always seem a little odd, but that one didn't, because I've never noticed that. I know the line, but you know what I mean? Like you don't think about it in that context until, but the Jango Fett one always stuck out to me. I'm like, I feel like you should have said galaxy there.
I always sort of agree with that too. I always found that strange. And then the other thing in terms of the announcers, it's just like a little funny sort of nitpick in how they do editing. So when Anakin is either takes the lead or is winning the race, on the monitors behind them, they have two behind. So if you're facing the announcers on the right-hand side, one of the monitors has his pod race and the other has a picture of him. And the picture of him, his pod racer, his pod. Yeah. And then the other picture is clearly a still from him when he's talking to Yoda in the Jedi Temple, being grilled about like, you miss your mother or ship a cup or whatever. And they just use that as his like profile picture, even though it doesn't happen until later in the movie. And I just thought that was funny because they do that a lot in movies where they just like take something and use it for other purposes. So I just thought that was funny.
It's funny that you bring that up too, because I just happened to be on that frame and I was like kind of looking over the scenario, and then you're like, also, and I was like, oh yeah, I was just looking at that, and I thought that was kind of strange that you could see he almost looks like Jonathan Taylor Thomas in that little picture there.
Right. Yeah.
So another short one is that I was kind of examining over his pod, and I noticed that behind him, there's again, like if you're looking at it in the scene to the right, but to his left, like back here, there's a little satellite dish, and it reminds me sort of like Han Solo's satellite dish for the Millennium Falcon. And what's interesting
on Anakin's pod?
Yeah, on Anakin's. There's a little satellite dish there. And what interests me is in the world of this technology that they have that, you know, transmits across galaxies and stuff, what real benefit of these satellite dishes, but yet they're still being used. And it makes me wonder, what, even if you were to argue, okay, well, they're still using basic technology, but it's super powered so it can go further, whatever. What even is that satellite dish doing on the pod? What could it be broadcasting or transmitting or receiving in that moment? What purpose would there be for a fairly sizable satellite dish behind it? I would say it's I don't know, I could go find it. I would say it's a 10-inch satellite dish
for like radar or something.
Radar
for like, night racing, maybe. I don't know.
It's not spinning around. There's you know what? I'm looking at
George
it now.
Lucas be like, ultimately, just want.
It looks like there's two. It looks like there's another little smaller one. They're not spinning around, so I don't think it's radar. I honestly, it probably is just one of these things where they were like, this will make it look a little bit more whatever.
Yeah, I like that. All right,
but I'm not sure what the benefit of those satellite dishes would be.
Speaking of pod racers and pods, that's a good one too, because I didn't notice any accessories for mannequins, so that's a good catch. Dud Bolt, one of the pod racers, his model is a Volpterine 327, which is the famous number always used in Star Wars, 327. So that's clearly Lucas doing his own self-referentials. And then this one I got a kick out of. So Clegg Holdfast, who looks like one of the more literally animated of the characters, he gets announced and he does this bow, and he has these medals on his shirt that I never noticed before. They almost look like war medals. So I looked them up, and apparently the medals that he's wearing, Clegg Holdfast, are medals that he won pod racing. So he's wearing all his like victories on his chest, almost like whether it's like look at me or an intimidation factor or whatever. So it made me think it's like Tom Brady wearing his Super Bowl rings while playing in the next Super Bowl. So you see this guy Clegg Holdfast taking this bow, and he's got these medals on his shirt, and I never noticed them before. And then I looked deeper, and those are his pod race victory medals, and that's right after the 56-minute mark. He gets announced. I thought that was so funny. I got a kick out of it. And I love that little detail that they slapped in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a bunch others. I don't know if you want to, I don't know. I mean, this is a new segment. I don't know if we're taking turns. I don't know what we're doing here, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest too, like I didn't know what the limit on like how many things we were pointing out, like how long our lists are supposed to be.
Doesn't matter.
What is it's not, is it Aqualesh? What's the species that is opposite? They're both in the same planet. But there's like Admiral Akbar's species, and then there's like the other one that like has that triangle kind of head.
Is it like a Quailish or something like that?
I think it does start with a K, but I noticed in one of these scenes where Qui-Gon and Watto are having a conversation, there's one that walks around in the background, and that's not like crazy because, you know, you see similar species all the time, but it was the first time that I saw one and I go, what is a water-based species doing on Tatooine? Even if he's like visiting arguably or whatever, it still seems like an odd place for someone that his species is generally literally underwater all the time, you know.
I saw a few Quarrens, like the squid heads. And that's the same thing. Like, what are they doing in the desert? Are they just degenerate gamblers and they're there to watch the race?
Are we?
So Quarrens are like the things that look like sort of like Davy Jones in Pirates. They got
That's
like
what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
So
Quarren,
that's why I said like I said they have like triangle heads. It's like a peak at the top, and then it comes out like two things on the like ears or something on the sides. I maybe should have described them with tentacles in the front, but yeah, Quarren. That's what I was looking for.
And there's one scene where something happens. And you know, like you ever go to like a concert or a show and then like one person stands up and everyone stays seated and you're like, look at this guy. There's one of those Quarren that does that. It stands up, puts his arms up in the air like this, cheering. So he must have had more money on the race than everyone else.
This is a good time to mention, you know, this is sort of behind the scenes too, but like when it comes to those crowds, if you've ever watched the behind the scenes, they're like toothpicks with little pieces of Q-tips, that's what it is. Yeah. But basically just like a stick with like a little paint on the end. So it's not really something that you could say like, oh, I never noticed that before. But like, it is one of those like sort of things where if you didn't know that, go back and look at some of those scenes and be like, you know, that's not digital characters that they added in for a lot of this.
Right.
They just did it, you know, like a weird kind of camera trick.
And speaking of that, two things. One, I did spot for the first time in Ithorian, the Hammerhead, at 5620, a more elaborate looking Ithorian, actually. Big.
I felt like that particular one too I was like, well, you know, we've seen that species before, but like, I was like, but that one looks giant.
Yeah.
Like, it looks bigger than the normal one.
Yeah. And then speaking of the crowd stuff, they used a shot, at least one shot of the crowd multiple times during the race scene. And the only way I know this is because, they have those stairs, almost like a coliseum, in between the sections of the seats.
Right.
There's one guy walking up the stairs, and he stops, turns, looks at the race, and then goes back up the stairs. And I see the exact same shot later towards the end of the race. So Lucas was either like, no one's going to notice, just throw it in there, or they accidentally used the same shot twice. Now, Star Wars has done similar stuff like that in the past, and I enjoy it. But it was cool to like catch it this time because I had never caught it before, which means it works.
Right. And while we're on the crowds too, again, like I don't know how to like point this out. Like, oh, I never noticed that random person. But when you pause on a crowd scene and you look around, I feel, and I could be wrong, but I feel like it's one of those times where they just like have so many different like species of not even like crazy alien things. Sometimes it's just people with like markings and stuff on their face. And I know that like a character like Ahsoka is not a good one because she does have like the bigger headpiece and stuff, like Baris Offrey or something like that. Sometimes there are face markings that are part of a part of a species, but for all intents and purposes, they're still like human, but then they say like, oh, it's a different species alien because they have those markings which make them whatever they are. So I'm looking at some of these crowd shots, and I'm looking at a lot of these people, and I'm like, okay, some of these might actually just be people who put face paint on for the sporting event or something. But the vibe that I'm getting from a lot of these people is these are supposed to be one of those types of George Lucas aliens.
Or it's a religious thing for those people in story or something, maybe.
Well, again, yeah, but that's adding face paint.
Oh,
my point,
it looked like paint, didn't it though?
Well, that's what I'm saying is like, I mean, obviously is paint in real life.
No, yeah.
But I think some of those are not just like paint or tattoos or something like that. I think those are supposed to be when you're born into this galaxy and you're part of that species, they all have these markings. You know what I mean? And it's just like that was an easy way to, and I mean, they all sci-fi shows do that. You're going to see that on Star Trek all the time. Like, what makes that person an alien? Well, don't you see they have like something on their face, and there's like they're mostly human. They're 99% human.
Like Spock, he just something. Has the pointy ears. That's it.
Yeah. Or Worf or whatever, like essentially human, and then like some crazy forehead.
He forgot to use Botox. Yeah.
All they're changing is just a little bit, but all of that said is I was looking around and I'm like, this looks like a lot of different alien species, quote unquote,
humanoid,
that we don't really ever see anywhere else. And it's interesting to look at them and say, at the time when they were hiring and making the movie, just to go like, we need another one. Okay. And they do some stuff and they're like, you're right. I think some of that probably is like religious or fanatic or something like that. But it has that vibe of like sci-fi alien that Star Wars does not shy away from.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's cool to look at them and see maybe how they got there on the day, or it makes you wonder like how often people in like Star Wars Resistance, they're putting those aliens like back in the backgrounds and they're also walking around.
Yeah.
And you don't put together like, oh, this is not the first time we've seen that species. They actually were first seen in Phantom Menace.
Right.
But like they pop up here and there. Yeah. They're just never main characters. So
they could be a tribe from a certain part of Tatooine. They could be born with that. Yeah, there's that. I mean, I noticed that too. And it is interesting because I never really paid attention to that. Now, I have two that the audience and you will be like, come on, John, really? The first one is, and I don't know how I missed this or whatever.
John told me one before we got started.
This is that.
This is that one.
I wanted to pretend like this was the first time I was telling you.
Oh, all right.
Okay. It's okay. So there's clearly a female-looking, white-skinned, literally, sniper or something, way up above the race. And it turns out it's Aura Singh. And I never knew that until I saw that and looked into it. And you were like, what? Really?
Yeah.
So
I was like, how did you miss
folks.
that one?
Yeah.
I think, that's a big one because that's her first appearance.
Yeah. Some of our audience might not be too familiar with that. And of course, we know how Aura Singh dies because speaking of being up high, I guess you like being up high.
So that's another reason I thought that it was surprising because in Solo, the joke about I pushed her felt reminiscent of her first appearance.
Yeah.
Because the first time we ever see her, she's standing on the edge of a cliff.
Yeah. The fall killed her. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Aura Singh. So for those who did know, feel free to take your jabs. That's cool. For those who didn't know, there's Aura Singh at the...
That's a live action character that was brought to animation,
right?
Not the other way around.
And it's at the 1 hour and 1 minute mark and about 9 or 10 seconds. You'll see her. And she clearly has some sort of rifle on her back. She's looking to take someone out. Now, the other one is... This is just clearly background stuff, and I like ever since I first saw this movie, I'm focused on the pod racers, and the pods and all that. But in the canyons, I didn't realize that those were dwellings built into the walls of the canyons until I really closely looked. That even in those tight walls, the little like white things you see on the sides are actual homes, and people could like poke their head out and look at the race as it's happening. I never noticed that before.
So I did notice that, but where I will take it to a point where I didn't notice it until today is that there are also some of those cutout areas within the main arena area. So obviously there's stands, but on the other side of the stands, there's rocks where some of those areas are cut out. Now, I can't confirm that they're also not just like more expensive areas for some of the highest bidding gamblers to hang out with, but they look very similar to the ones that were in the walls of the canyons and stuff. And I thought, okay, well, maybe when they let these people stay here or whatever, you could live here if you wanted. Maybe they're expensive apartments that are for lease or whatever, who knows? But some of them are also actually located closer to the arena, and they look to me like places to live.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I did not notice those within the canyon. How many more do you have?
I have a very short one too. This isn't really anything, but like I know that there are caverns. There was like caves and areas where you were kind of cutting through the rocks, but I didn't really take them as like cave-like and stuff. And this is the first time I really noticed how many like actually don't know what the term for this is, but like stalactite from coming from down, stalagmite when it's up from the bottom. But like when they connect, I feel like that's a different term. There are portions of the area that they go through where if you were to ask me without being able to see the movie, what is the terrain? I would just say they were all rocks. They were like jagged rocks, but I didn't realize there was so much of it that was cave-like with these types of formations that feel very moisture-based, water-based. And I'm like, interesting. Like, how is it that some of these formations are out here? How did these caves come to be if there's not moisture involved? And it made me think of where did we get confirmation recently? Oh, Obi-Wan, right?
It was either Obi-Wan or Book of Boba Fett.
One of the two, something recently where they talked about how Tatooine was like an ocean planet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is wild. If you're going to try to tell me like some of the things in Phantom Menace who maybe they made and look cool, and then after the fact they look at it and they go, oh well, you know what, that doesn't make a lot of sense, has then driven the story to say, well, we have to make this make sense. Right. There's fish bones in the desert. We have to make that make sense. So that whole water thing may partially be in relation to some of these formations you see on the pod race trail.
Then does that
track.
mean something like a crate dragon? Did that have to evolve because it still moves through the sand like it's water? Did that used to be a water-based creature like Jack Fish, and then it had to evolve to become a sand swimming creature? And now we're getting really nerdy, and I kind of like that. But that is interesting. And
if you've got others, I've got one more that was the one I'm like saving for. I
have a couple of small ones.
All right.
So fun ones like observational. So right after the win, and Anakin pulls up, a bunch of people celebrating. There's a Rodian celebrating his win, and people are like, yeah, we've all seen Rodians. And it's not the one that's it's not Wald or whatever, the one that's hanging out with like Warwick Davis's Weasel and stuff like that. He's off to the side. The reason why I find it funny is he's wearing a vest just like Han Solo's, except it's blue. And he's just this Rodian rocking this like blue vest. So I thought that was funny. And then at just before the 1 hour and 10 minute mark, there is a shot of Weasel and Watto like complaining about the end of the race or whatever, and there's this girl behind them, and she's celebrating like she's so happy, and you could tell it's an extra, and they're like telling her to celebrate. So she's celebrating. Then she looks to her. She's looking for someone to celebrate with. So she looks to her right and looks to her left and looks behind her, and there's no one there. So then she just goes back to doing this. And it's just like so funny that that's there, and I've never seen it before. It's this girl looking for someone to celebrate with, and there's no one there around her. So check, look for her. And then a cooler one with Jabba. So at the beginning, Jabba starts the race, of course. You have Bib Fortuna, who's actually played by Matthew Wood in this, and he also returned to play him in the teaser or post-credit scene in Mando for Book of Boba Fett. There's also a blue spike-haired dancer, one of Jabba's dancers there. Now, this is not a slave or a prisoner because she's not wearing chains and she's moving rather freely. And at the end of the race, you see her walk off on her own wearing the metal bikini. And I don't know if it's exactly the one Leia wore, but it looks close enough to the point where it's closer looking to the bikini Leia wore than Chewie looked closer to Chewie from the prequels to the original trilogy. So
what timestamp is this?
That is just before the race starts. So when they first show Jabba, so you'll see her, and the top part, like the bra part, looks like it's exactly
yeah.
And the bottom part, she also has sort of pants on or something. But I think that'd be so funny if it turned out Leia as his prisoner, he didn't have anything to demoralize her with, like for that. So he just used one of the dancer bikinis he had and put her in that or something to tie in how he sort of operated. But that dancer, and she has the blue spiked hair, and she walks freely on her own after the race. She's not like pulled by anybody or anything. So I don't think it's a slave or a prisoner. I think she's just there as entertainment for Jabba, and she's wearing what looks very much like the exact bikini that Leia wears in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit to the scene as if you're kind of looking around. I've never noticed that there's an R5 looking droid in that scene too. There's another dancer who's kind of behind, but I believe that one is one that we see in the special edition of Return of the Jedi, right? That's also the same character.
Oh, could be. Yeah.
That's one of the dancers. I might be wrong on that too. Also behind her though, there's these guys who are dressed the same way as in Return of the Jedi when Palpatine like releases his advisors so that Darth Vader can walk up.
Oh,
there's like those guys with the weird like kind of purple hats.
Yeah.
Red and like burgundy and purple. in gray or whatever. There's a couple guys in the background that are wearing those outfits in that scene too. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. It obviously ties into sort of the greater, like, who are you? Like, what kind of sleazy money person are you? You know what I mean? Like, you're just like shifting money around and doing bad business, you know? This kind of feels a little shady.
Yeah, I agree. And I forget what those guys are called. There's only something they're a group, and one of them is like the guy who tells Vader that Director Krennic's there in Rogue One. It's like these guys who are like,
oh yeah.
They're like advisors, I guess.
That's what I said, advisors. Yeah, they seem
but
like
I don't know
they're
if there's an official title to that group, but yeah, they're part of the Alou family.
I'm adding another one right now. Actually, there's like a little thing that I'm noticing. It's a little square object, and it's got 4 little hover things on each one of the corners, and then across it they just have like a tarp. And I'm like, so is it only literally to shade the one small section of the crowd? Why don't you guys have bigger versions of this?
Oh yeah,
that would cover the whole crowd. But like, there's a scene here where you can see that this thing's like kind of floating above the crowd, and it's obviously hovering.
But maybe like a drone or something.
Yeah.
I have one that I want to run by you. It's my last one, and it's at the very end of the race. I'd never noticed this before, but they do the shot of Shmi, Padme, Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon closes his eyes before the end of the race. It's the very end, though. It's when Anakin and Sebulba is neck and neck. He closes his eyes and sort of looks up, clearly like he's tuning into the Force. And then there's a shot of him looking to his left. And we don't know what he's looking at, but he opens his eyes and looks to his left.
I did pause it at one point and saw that he had his eyes closed. And it felt to me like a little bit like, you know, kind of thing. But I think you're probably right that it's...
I want to say that he felt, I don't know if anxious about the outcome, that he like used the Force to see how it was going to turn out or something. Because he closes his eyes in a very similar way that he closes his eyes when he's meditating between the force field doors when Maul's waiting to get back at him.
Mm-hmm.
He lifts his head slightly and closes his eyes. To me, that's not like, I'm tired, I need a coffee. It's like him like tuning into the Force a little bit. And it's at the very end, again, towards the very end of the race, they show the shot of the group looking on, and he's behind Shmi, and I don't know if he has his hands on her shoulders, but he lifts his head and he closes his eyes. So I want to hear what you think and what the crowd, our audience thinks about that.
Yeah, I'm scanning through. I'm trying to find that moment so I can get a little bit of a better like visual on what you're talking about. But like I said before, I do remember as I was flicking through, I noticed there was a scene where he had his eyes closed, but I took it a little bit more like he was just worried about the scene in a different way, just like a natural thing. But when you bring up how he might be at that moment sort of meditating on the moment, you know, and saying like, what's the vibe here? Are we winning? Are we losing? What is this?
It's around like 108.50 on Disney Plus.
That is, I'm way past that. I thought you said it was like the end of the race.
This is the end of the race.
Oh, sorry. My bad. Yeah, sorry. That's my bad. I don't know. I don't want to make complete dead air, so I'm trying to find this scene.
No, yeah. But like Shmi's like, I can't look. But before that, it's to me, it's clear as day that Qui-Gon's doing some sort of like meditating or something with. The exact spot is 108.50. Yeah. He closes his eyes and lifts his head. And I just find it very interesting. It looks very like, I'm going to just do Jedi stuff here for a second. Yeah.
I broke the player trying to skip through so much.
But anyway, check it out and let me know what you guys think. To me, it looks like a Jedi meditation move. But anyway. You said you have one more big one?
Yes, I do. I am pretty confident, and I'm willing to hear anybody's speculation on this not be the case if you want to go in and look at it. But I believe I found a prop and continuity error.
Oh, okay. What
So this one is at 1:16:50. And
all right, so you're past the race.
well, yeah. I think it happens a few times during the race. I didn't go through and clock how many times they actually show the shot. But it's any time we're with Padme and Shmi and Qui-Gon in that booth, and there's a shot looking through Padme and Shmi at the like monitor that Shmi's holding in her hands.
So can you verify? Is it 106.50 then?
1:16:50? It might be 1:06:50.
Yeah, because 1:16:50 is when Maul's about to attack, so it's well past. So I'm going to assume 106.50 because that falls within the time of the race. Okay, let's take a look. So what are you saying now? It's a viewpoint from behind?
Oh, man, come on.
Well, that's okay. So explain the scene, though. Because we can't be doing dead air here.
It's looking past Padme and Shmi at the monitor that Shmi's holding in her hand.
Mhm.
And when that scene is being shown, she's holding the monitor as if there was a screen in the middle and then there was the body around it, like the bezels, and she's holding the device like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then in every other scene where they show them just as a group, or they show them from the front where you can see their faces, she's holding the monitor and it's the same device, but now it has little connecting pieces and two bone tusks.
Tusks, I saw the tusks.
And she's holding on to them like they're handlebars. She's holding on to the tusks. And
I see what you're saying.
You start looking around the crowd, and there's all these monitors throughout the stands and stuff, and they're all on they're on stands.
Mm-hmm.
But none of them have those tusks either. They all are like just the basic like little thing that you grab onto with a screen. But theirs has these tusks, except for the one scene where it's from the back and you're supposed to look at what's on the monitor. She's holding that whole thing with her hand and not the tusks.
Oh.
So the prop got changed at some point from scene to scene, or they were like, no one will notice this. Like, she's just holding the thing. Nobody's going to pay attention to it.
Cool.
Man, I literally wrote down the time. I'll try to find it, but
it's in the pod race scene for anyone who's wondering. No, that's cool, man. I wouldn't say that's big, but I think that's cool because
the reason I think it's big is because it's like, it's not part of the story that you just never noticed before. I'm like, that's an actual error, like a mistake in the filmmaking.
Like those too. Yeah.
And usually those are things that people go to look up, flubs and movie goofs and things like that. And I was like, I don't know, it just wasn't overlooked by me, but I don't know, I felt like it had a little bit extra elevation because it's like a mistake, and not just like something I never noticed.
It's like in a couple shots on Tatooine, the like brief moments where Obi-Wan's actually out of the ship, where his braid's on the other side, just because George Lucas liked how the shot looked that way better, and he didn't care. He's like, I don't care. Mm-hmm. But I don't have anything else. Are you good? Like, I think we.
Yeah, that was the main one because I don't know. Maybe you didn't think it was as cool as I did, but I was like, I found an error in Star Wars.
Cool. I thought you were like, I got a big one, and I thought it was gonna be something that I was like, oh man, I can't believe
gonna change the way we look at the scene or something.
But I do like those sort of continuity things for sure, because those are fun to point out.
I always felt like it was something too where like, or not, I always felt like when I was going into this, I felt like somebody was going to be able to be like, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't think I'm wrong. So please try to
check it
make
out.
me wrong,
Watch
yeah.
the scene again, and that's the whole point of this segment. So I hope everyone enjoyed this, and now I want you to think about all the other scenes that are busy scenes. Like, just think about Attack of the Clones in the bar, or like there's so many scenes that we can do this new segment with. So I hope everyone enjoyed it. Did you have a good time talking about it and doing it, James?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah. It leads to so much discovery in like a good way. Like, I know there's a podcast too. Is it Star Wars Minute that does this sort of thing where they just kind of like travel through segments of Star Wars? And
don't they literally do minute by minute? Like one episode is a whole minute, I think.
No. No. They do. My understanding of their show, if I'm not mistaken, is that they take 1 minute of Star Wars and then they podcast about everything that they discover in that minute.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Lacey's been on that show. I'm not.
She has.
Yeah. Yeah. So I enjoyed this. I like revisiting a lot of these familiar scenes, and just when you think you know everything, there's plenty. There was even another shot that's completely arbitrary of guys in the background. There's 3 guys, and one guy's on his knees checking out the sand, and he points behind him, and then they all turn around and start walking in that direction. I'm like, why is that there? It's amazing. And I love that George Lucas, like, he has talked about that. He's like, let's throw some of this in the background, so some of this. And I think he likes just like letting people discover things. So I had a lot of fun with this, and look forward to doing more scenes in the future. But that brings us to the end of the show, James. That was we're over an hour, but it went by quick.
Yeah, it did.
We want to thank everybody for listening and watching and being a part of TRB. Let us know for sure what you think of Did You See That? And hopefully we can do more in the future. And like James said before, Patreon is huge for us, but we do have to say a special thank you to our top tiers, Generals and Spice Runners: CARMELO, John RISI, JETTA Rosewater, Frank Grande, Darth Hurricane, Nick KRATZ, Chris Morales, Brian Smith, Matt Chitty, DANI, Mike Mori, Matt Heath, Brendan McLaughlin, Count PEPTO, Sneaky Zebra, Aaron Ellington, Colin Cormier, Jolton Jedi DiMaggio, Diana, and Dave Hornack. And our Spice Runners: David Probus, Neil Shaw, Kendall GELNER, Thomas Hennessy, Andrew Staley, Jeremy Myers, Michael Fry, and THEFORTWORTHIAN. And all of our patrons and all of our listeners, viewers, everyone who is a part of TRB in any way, thank you all very, very much. We appreciate it. For me, you can find me on X or Twitter or whatever, and Threads and Blue Sky at Johnny Hoey, and my movie pod, Just Like the Movies. We'll be doing Airplane next. We have Titanic out now. James, how about you?
You can find me on X and Instagram, both at Myra Trunks.
And Lacey at Lacey Gilleran on all the social media platforms. And then as far as this pod, of course, keep spreading the word about the channel. We're trying to grow our subscriber count. youtube.com/@the-resistance-broadcast. And audio apps, whether that's Spotify, Apple, wherever, make sure you're subscribed and rate us over there. And just keep telling your friends who like Star Wars about TRB. We appreciate it very much. We'll be back with you later this week, as always, with TRB Live. So we hope you enjoy your week, stay cool, and we'll see you next time with another episode right here on TRB. We'll see you around, kids.